will start now. Now I'll tell you the time is 11:05. Let us start, Mr. Ravindran. Hand it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jairam. A very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the, I think kindly please switch off your mobile phones. A lot of disturbance.
Babaji, good morning. Sorry, I couldn't. Just now I saw.
Okay. Can I start now, sir?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Good morning to all of you and welcome to the 6th edition of the Inter-Chapter PRCI Talent Hunt. This edition is being brought to you by the PRCI Hyderabad chapter. Well, on behalf of the National Council, I deem it an honor to welcome all of you who have joined from different parts of our country and abroad for the presentation on pandemic public relations. The speakers are Mr. Frederick Michael and Father Vinit George, and moderating the discussion for this webinar will be Mr. Shakil Ahmed. He is now sitting at Tirupati. Before we move on with the hunt, first let me introduce to you our panel of judges. We have with us Mr. G.S. Bawa, who is the ex-General Manager, Airports Authority of India, and presently he is the Secretary, PR Society, Delhi, and also the Secretary General of Air Travelers Association, ATA, and Executive Committee member at the Foundation for Aviation and Sustainable Tourism. We also have in our midst Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi, who was the former General Manager PR of Air India. She is a communication professional with over 30 years experience in aviation and tourism sector. Currently, Vijay Lakshmi is the director of the Governing Council PRCI, and she is now hooked to our network from Canada. We also have with us this morning Dr. B.K. Ravi. He was the registrar of Bangalore University. Presently, he is the chairman, Board of Studies and HOD Department of Mass Communication, Bangalore University. He is also on the board of our directors, PRC NA. We also have Mr. Ruben, who has over 30 years of experience in advertising, print and international trading. He was the national president of PRCI and was also the chairman of the PRCI Governing Council. Presently, he remains totally committed to community welfare and fulfills his social responsibility at every given opportunity. We also have with us Mr. B.K. Sahu, who was the former chief of PR, Kolkata Port Trust. He is a hardcore PR practitioner and teacher of public relations for decades. He is also the member of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, London, which is the world's Royal Chartered Body for Public Relations Professionals. We also have Mr. Yogesh Joshi, who is the Vice President Corporate Affairs of the Tata Group. Mr. Yogesh is an eminent corporate communicational professional and the driving force behind ABCI, that is the Association of Business Communicators of India. He is a person who is credited for elevating Indian PR to the international status. We also have with us Mr. S. Narendra, who was a Principal Information Officer, Government of India, and the Press Advisor to the Prime Minister's Office, that is the PMO, during the Honorable Prime Minister Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao Garu. He is presently our Director, PRCI. We also have with us Mr. Naresh Kumar, Senior General Manager, Corporate Communication of the Power Grid Corporation of India and the former Chairman, PR Society, New Delhi. He is very active on social media and is an alumni of IIMC. He is one of our youngest jury member. We also have Mr. R.T. Kumar Ranganathan. He is the CEO of Oyster Advertising. He is a fine actor, writer, and a motivational speaker. He was also the national president of PRCI and is a celebrity advertising professional and is known for his wit and humor. Friends, I am Ravindran, former General Manager Corporate Communication, NTPC, and I'm the Senior Vice President of PRCI. We also have with us Mr. MB Jairam, you all know as he's the chairman emeritus and chief mentor of PRCI. He's the mastermind for the show and a person who has brilliant ideas and he believes in nurturing them. We also have Mr. Dr. T. Vinay Kumar. I don't know whether he has joined. I think he's not there, but I take this opportunity to welcome all our PRCI dignitaries who have joined from different parts of our country and also the members of YCCI who have joined for this program. I take this opportunity to welcome each one of you for your participation and motivating our team PRCI. Now to give you a quick brief on the scoring pattern, the total marks allotted for the entire show is going to be 50. This has been divided in various segments like attendance and promotion, which is going to garner 5 marks for you. Posters and theme of the webinar, 5 marks. Time management, 5 marks. The event flow has also got 5 marks. Feedback from the audience is going to be 5 marks. Moderator's role in steering the event is also going to be given marks, which is going to be 5. And the speaker's performance, this shall be evaluated on a 20-point scale. That is 10 marks will be awarded to each speaker. But I would request the team, please ensure that the speakers will have to speak for a minimum duration of 15 minutes. Finally, there will be a question answer session at the end of the event. The questions only, I would say limited number, should be picked up from the chat box and the moderator will be able to pick it up for all of us. The moderator must also ensure that the juries also ask a few questions to the speakers on the subject of the presentation. All these activities are to be coordinated by the moderator within the allotted time of 60 minutes. Well, if you have done any pre-event promotions in the social media platforms, you can send the posters to us at PRCI Global Conference 2021 @gmail.com. This will be shared with our jury members. Finally, a quote, ladies and gentlemen, life is all about the little decisions you make every day. You can't change the decisions of the past, but every new day is another opportunity to make the right ones. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's now over to the Hyderabad chapter for their presentation.
Yeah, your time starts from now. It is 11:13. And for jury's information, this is group number 2, Hyderabad. Carry on.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, especially to our Chairman Emeritus, Mr. Jairam, President PRCI, President YCC, all our senior presidents and all the senior members of PRCI, WCC and YCC, all the zonal heads, all the chapter heads, all the members of PRCI, and most important in this webinar competition, this talent hunt webinar competition, is our respected juries. So this topic of today's PR, how public relation has acted towards this pandemic globally and nationally, our speakers are going to say. I welcome you to the webinar once again, Anindita Sinha, chapter chair, Hyderabad chapter. We have some fantastic speakers today, Mr. Frederick Michael, who's also the Director, National Executive Council, PRCI, and also Hyderabad member and ex-senior public relation officer, South Central Railways. We have Father Vineet George, again our PRCI Hyderabad member, and also doctoral research scholar from IIT Hyderabad, and who can, ignore or who can forget Mr. Shakil Ahmed, Vice Chairman, PRCI Hyderabad, and of course, Deputy General Manager, Rail Land Development Authority of Secunderabad. Once again, thank you, sincere thank you to each one of you for joining in this webinar today. I hand over the forum to our moderator, Mr. Shakil Ahmed.
Namaskara, Adab, and a very good afternoon to Jairam sir, the entire jury, and all the participants in the webinar, the second webinar being hosted by the Hyderabad chapter of Public Relations Council of India. The topic for the day is public relations by governments, global and national. You have got prominent speakers from the chapter who would be presenting their viewpoints on the subject. For the global, it's Father Vinny George who would be doing the job. And when it comes to the national perspective, it's Mr. Frederick Michael who would be holding the show. As we proceed ahead, I would like to just make a small mention of what these two people of caliber actually hold in terms of their background. Father Vinny George is a doctoral scholar from IIT Hyderabad. He has been holding immense experience in the perspective of management and corporate communication. He has been a classified management educator and a researcher. Before picking on his present infatuation, I would say, determined purpose in life, he had been working for a few organizations, amongst which are some very eminent entities like the Dell Computers. He had worked for the General Electric. Then he had also worked for the Power Grid Corporation of India. He has been a gold medalist in public relations and holds an MPhil in management. At 38, he has been the youngest recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the United Writers Association of India. He is also a visiting faculty at the Symbiosis School of Law at Hyderabad and Aravali School of Management, Bengaluru. Father Vinny George, young at heart, an eminent persona in the PR fraternity, in the PR circle of Hyderabad, would not be joining in to present his brief on what pandemic is in terms of global perspective when it comes to public relations. Over to Father Vinny George, please.
Thank you, Shakil sir, for that introduction. It gives me immense pleasure to invite you all for my presentation. It's a very brief presentation showcasing the ways in which the governments in general across the globe, as well as global leaders in particular, have used public relations and communications to preempt as well as to offset the harmful effects of COVID crisis. So that is what we are going to look into. We are also going to see in a very objective manner what are the ways in which they handled media, public relations, and communications. And without being judgmental, we are trying to be objective here. And whether they succeeded or not, we will assess on our own basis, but then we will not get carried away by the various political ramifications or political inclinations that we already have in our minds. So keeping those things aside, we are going to look at the ways in which the governments and global leaders have used communication during the COVID-19 crisis. So with this brief introduction, let me proceed with my presentation. The governments around the world are faced in this COVID-19 crisis with three extraordinary challenges. The first one is a public health emergency to contain the virus, including identifying and treating infected populations. So that is the first challenge. The second challenge is the widespread food and livelihood insecurity due to mandated stoppage of economic activity and the resulting disruption of food supplies. And thirdly, as most of us are undergoing it now, is the adoption of emergency powers to address the crisis and maintain public safety. For example, the lockdown in India and elsewhere. Now, as it was told during the introduction that I am a researcher at IIT Hyderabad. So when this topic was being agreed upon to be spoken today, I did a little bit of research going through different literature available on the internet to collate and see what are the different communication strategies which are common to all the governments and global leaders. So I could get into a table format, which is containing 6 goals and 6 means of achieving those goals. So the first goal, which is common to all the governments having a PR strategy, is to control rumors and reduce ambiguity. And the means of doing is by denying the rumors, correcting false information, flagging fake news, and disseminating correct information about the virus, number of infected cases, and the vaccination plans. The second goal, to promote effective, healthy behaviors. So that is achieved through awareness of effective, healthy behaviors such as hand washing and social distancing. The third communication strategy's goal is to make positive news. And this is done through circulating success stories of the government in confronting and containing the pandemic. The fourth communication goal is to empathize with the citizens. So this is done through supporting the citizens and medical staff and reassuring the availability of food and stability of daily life. The fifth one is to clarify government actions. So this is done through conveying decisions and procedures for dealing with the pandemic regarding health, economy, society, education, travel, and vaccination. And the final goal is to warning against the violation of COVID-19 protocols and the penalties imposed for non-compliance. Now, I would like to take you through the different governments across the globe on how they have formulated a communication or public relations strategy. They have succeeded or not succeeded. It depends on how concretely they have implemented their plan. But at least most of the countries had some plan in place. So let us look into those plans. First, I would like to take the example of government of Australia. The government of Australia constituted a multidisciplinary task force called GO8, comprising experts from the nation's 8 leading universities. And they submitted an independent report titled COVID-19 Roadmap to Recovery, a report for the nation. And this report was based on the evidence-based recommendations from epidemiologists, researchers, and social scientists. And this was presented to the National Cabinet and the Australian government. Now, this task force was comprising mainly of doctors, medical researchers, and scientists. But it is very heartening to see that they have highlighted the role of public health communication as central to their effort in containing the pandemic. I will just read out from the report there. It says, public health communication is central to addressing the pandemic, and the report has defined this communication as a two-way process engaging policymakers and communities. Now I move to the government of Brazil. We know Brazil is ruled by President Bolsonaro. In the beginning, he derided COVID-19 as a little flu, which worsened the crisis in Brazil. Now, Brazil's case study is a case of failure in containing the pandemic. We know Brazil today is at number 2 when it comes to COVID cases and COVID deaths. So it is a case of mismanagement, and let us see how President Bolsonaro has messed up the system, because of which it is in the crisis today. So President Bolsonaro used his constitutional powers to interfere in the health ministry's administrative matters, even micromanaging such small things as clinical protocols, data disclosure, and vaccine procurement, which is something big. So we see that he created an image that he is somebody who centralizes his power. He interfered into health ministry's matters and micromanaged it and gave an impression that he wants centralization of power. And he reinforced this image further when he vetoed a legislation that would have both mandated the use of masks in religious sites and compensated the health professionals permanently harmed by the pandemic. So he vetoed out these two legislations in order to uh, facilitate further the spread of pandemic. Okay, that was not intentional, but then that was the result of this veto power that he used. Next, he obstructed state government's efforts to promote social distancing and used his decree power to allow many businesses to remain open as essentials, including spas and gyms. And then he aggressively promoted unproven medicines, notably hydrochloroquine, to treat COVID-19 patients. And more importantly, he blamed the Brazilian state governments and never took the responsibility upon himself for the mismanagement of the pandemic in Brazil. And in last year, December, he declared that he himself would not take the vaccine because of its side effects. And most importantly, the people of Brazil saw 4 health ministers being changed during this COVID-19 period. So all this contributed to a loss of public confidence in President Bolsonaro and his government. Next, we move on to government of Germany, which is a success story. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel initially delegated the crisis communication to her Minister of Health. But as she saw that the pandemic was getting severe by the day, she herself took over the crisis communication part from her health minister, and she used to do the press briefings by herself. Merkel adopted a calm and caring, but also analytical tone in her response to the crisis. She regularly discussed technical issues such as importance of correct behavior, absence of medical treatments and vaccines, the introduction of short-term allowances for affected workers, and more recently, the supply of protective gear from Asia, particularly India, and new production in Germany. So she was somebody who was looking at both the pros and cons. She was not trying to hide her government's inefficiencies. She admitted that there are certain things which are lacking. For example, protective gear are not in good supply. We are importing it from Asia, but we need to manufacture it here in Germany. So she was able to address the issues point blank, and she was not secretive, trying to project a good image of the government, but being very candid. And that really struck a chord with the people of Germany. Then these technical themes dominated her press briefings and conferences. Merkel also frequently addressed the public in audio and video podcasts and televised addresses to the nation, just like our own Prime Minister. And through these channels, Merkel also stressed the human side of the crisis, which was really touching for the people who listened to her. Now we move to the government of France. So there we know the President Emmanuel Macron is another global leader who has a success story regarding COVID-19 crisis. So in his first address, the French president made it very clear that France is at war with COVID, the coronavirus, okay, at war with COVID-19 crisis. And all his speeches contained several war metaphors. For example, he said, deceased nurses falling during the crisis, a response organized around the lines of defense, and children of the nation fighting against the virus. So he used war language, and his speeches called for a national unity to defend the nation. And in his speech, he expressed the gratitude of a nation to its heroes in the white scrubs, meaning the doctors and nurses. And like an army commander, he scolded the citizens for not complying with official protocols of COVID-19. However, the other members of the government only partly applied this framework of the president in terms of war. Some even deviated from it to another extreme. For example, the French Prime Minister, he only referred 3 times to war in 7 discourses that he made since the beginning of COVID-19. He adopted a more emotional human interest framework. Now we move to the next government, which is the government of UK. Here we have Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He adopted a proactive and pragmatic approach to the crisis. He took time to explain the importance of hand washing and suggested singing Happy Birthday on one occasion, providing a personal touch similar to German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And we know that Boris Johnson himself got COVID-19 and he was quarantined for a while. And he was able to relate with the suffering of the people. And so he could emerge as a leader who empathized with the people. He repeatedly stressed the significance of the UK's National Health Service as part of the broad national effort. For a while, he hosted daily briefings where he read the latest statistics and government officials elaborated on the technicalities of the crisis and the government's responses to it. The UK's reversal from initially a casual position to a more serious treatment of the COVID-19 crisis was because of the daily briefings from the PM, and it also was reflected through visual communication, not just through words, but even visually. The podium from which the Prime Minister used to address the nation every day during the press briefing, they changed the podium's appearance. They removed the coat of arms or the emblem of the Prime Minister and replaced it with slogans such as "Stay home, save the National Health Service, save lives." And they had it in bright yellow color with red bars across, just like a safety tape. So there was a visual appeal to the communication being done from the side of the government of UK. Now we come to the government of America. We know that during this COVID-19 time, we saw two American presidents at the helm of affairs. Firstly, we had President Trump and then succeeded by President Joe Biden. Now, President Trump did so many things, but then he finally admitted in his last address to the nation during his political campaigning for the presidential race, he said, "I did many things during the COVID-19 crisis, but my only mistake was mishandling public relations." He admitted to the nation that he has done many things, but he failed in handling public relations. So why did he say this? Because in mid-April 2020, that is last year, before the presidential elections, there was an opinion poll which said that half of the Americans did not trust the COVID-19 information being propagated by President Trump. So they had a lot of doubt. The American citizens doubted the information that was being given by President Trump. And from January to mid-March last year, Trump downplayed the threat posed by COVID-19 to the United States, as well as the severity of the outbreak, because of which people lost confidence in his leadership. Now we come to Joe Biden. 1 week into Joe Biden's presidency, a newly created White House COVID-19 response team began to host daily virtual briefings on the pandemic response. So notably absent from these meetings was the president himself. We know during Trump's time, he was coming all the time for the press briefings, and he was very much visible during the press briefings. He was there always. And he made certain goof-ups. Okay, he made certain off-the-cuff remarks which were confusing as well as sometimes downright dangerous. For example, he suggested that the virus might be treated by injecting disinfectants into the body, which was a laughable suggestion, and the people did not take Trump seriously. And then the COVID-19 response team briefings under Joe Biden only dealt with clear and matter-of-fact details, following a pattern that included senior health advisors sharing data and progress reports. Now, a key member of the response team of Joe Biden is Dr. Anthony Fauci, whom Joe Biden retained from the previous team. Okay, he was also a member of the COVID-19 response team under President Trump. He was retained by Joe Biden to continue. And Dr. Anthony Fauci, has emerged as the most popular government official who does a lot of press briefings.
Have we lost the connection? We got it.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
you are audible, Vinit. Please go on.
Okay. So I would like to conclude my presentation with this statement, which I found very interesting. This was made not by a PR professional, but by the Minister of Finance of Indonesia. She was addressing the National Public Relations Convention 2020, and she highlighted the role of PR during a crisis like this. She said, and I quote, "The challenge is not easy, of course, because we are not only facing the threat of COVID-19, but we also face hoax threats, namely wrong information or information that is deliberately disseminated to mislead or disturb the public. This is where the public relations and communication strategy is important." So with these words of the Finance Minister of the Government of Indonesia, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Excellent.
Thank you, Father Vinit, for an excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
The overall take in terms of Father Vinit's perspective when it comes to the international PR scenario pertaining to COVID is very well summarized, by the statement that has come from the Finance of Indonesia, when she said that the entire perspective of COVID is also in terms of the fake news, which has had a very, very, I would say, a very dangerous impact, on the entire society, because people were getting lost, getting carried away, with all the wrong info that was flowing in. So it was not just COVID, which impacted the society. It was, the glut of fake info, which caused immense damage. And that's where, PR really, should be playing a very, very eminent and a very, very responsible role. Thank you for the Vinit, for the excellent presentation that you have done. Now, distinguished jury and to the participants, I would like to introduce the second eminent speaker for this webinar today. He is Mr. Frederick Michael, a very well-known face of the PR fraternity nationally. His professional background basically, connects us, to the, I would say, pre-1980s period, when radio was the master. Mr. Frederick Michael, was a radio jockey, RJ, at the All India Radio Hyderabad, hosting a lot of programs in English. Commencing his career from there, he went on to pick up a host of qualifications, including a master's in public relations, a diploma in public administration, and more than all these things, probably one aspect which very, very few people, amongst these participants know is the fact that, we can consider him to be a linguist. He has got mastery over not just English, Hindi, Tamil, which is his mother tongue. He is as perfect, speaking a host of languages, including Telugu, Kannada, Marathi, and believe me, Gujarati and a bit of Punjabi also. I would say his success as a PR professional was rooted in over 30 years of service, that he had rendered for the railways, where he had gone to occupy a place of preeminence and, went on to project South Central Railways in the best, perspective everywhere around. Frederick Michael has occupied a host of important assignments, in the clergy, in the heritage committees in Hyderabad, including the INTAC. And one of the biggest credits that he owes, that he probably, has given to the society around is the fact that, he had been able to ensure that, one of the oldest churches of Hyderabad is preserved, which has went on to get, the Heritage Award from INTAC. Frederick Michael teaches PR at a lot of colleges in Hyderabad. I'm not naming them because virtually every college which has got journalism and communication as one of the subjects, Frederick's name is in. I would now request Mr. Frederick Michael to please speak on the national perspective of PR in the pandemic times. Over to you, Frederick Michael.
Yeah, good morning to all of you, and very especially to all the jury members, our chief mentor and the office bearers of the Public Relations Council of India. It's a great privilege and honor for me to present my views on today's topic, public relations during the pandemic, how PR acted as a tool of communication, very especially during this pandemic, and we'll be talking about the national scenario, the central government, and also the state governments, which played a crucial role in informing the public.
So you're muted, sir. Please unmute.
Frederick voice, yeah, muted.
Sorry, sir. Yeah, ever since the pandemic, which was declared on March 11th as the pandemic, mankind has been facing unprecedented crisis, which has threatened the very existence of human race. We have been experiencing setbacks, and we are also confident that cure is not far away. Almost every country in this world during this lockdown uh, has seen that the global market was in doldrums and entering in a state of recession. Businesses across the world, and especially in India, were also facing huge losses and forced to curb their expenses in various ways. The COVID-19 pandemic affected the whole of humanity and has changed every aspect of human behavior and living conditions, and as well as businesses across India. The pandemic also resulted in a crisis and a time for those organizations which have never faced anything like this. So this crisis is really has been a breathtaking and to ponder about how people have been able to overcome this pandemic and still are overcoming. And with the government of India taking a number of proactive measures and timely measures, such as travel restrictions, universal screening of passengers at the airports and seaports, suspensions of visas, and also self-quarantine measures, and effectively prevent and contain to manage the COVID-19 situation in the country. While the identification of additional quarantine facilities, the development of isolation wards, and the training of health workers, especially the medical practitioners and the paramedical staff, have been in for a lot of uh, praise, both from the governments, from the people across the nation and in various states. And we have seen how during this crisis, the paramedical staff, the doctors have come to the rescue of the patients, and their untiring efforts have proved and saved many lives. Though we had several deaths, but then that was not in our hands, and ensuring that adequate equipments, the PPE kits, the medicines, masks, etc., were being strengthened and furthering in all the states and the union territories in India. The pandemic has gradually clogged the conventional functioning of businesses and brands, which have been initially resulting in miscommunication and misguiding situations. However, the idea is to focus on making business and sustain their brand communication strategies even during such crisis and down periods.
Not audible, not audible.
Fred, you're not audible. Please
Okay.
check your mic.
The pandemic has completely changed
Yes,
the
you're
role
good now.
and
Please.
the role and responsibilities of PR, and there are many twists and turns in the traditional PR tools and communications. Mass plunging on press releases have become very targeted and refined and innovative, often with a personal touch. Many organizations were also playing a very important role in giving message across the nation and across the states to improve their brand image and also to put the bare facts before the public. Setting the right tone of this crisis communication is the essential of its success. And this can turn a disaster into an opportunity for a client and to garner the goodwill and take up more business depending upon how they deliver the message. And that is how the PR teams work tirelessly and relentlessly to communicate effectively to the masses and bring about self-confidence among the people of our nation. Effective communication and readiness of adapting to new environments and is the key to endure during such crisis times. Brands have now become very conscious, and especially during this pandemic, they would want to show empathy towards the existing and as well as the prospective customers with the help of PR. So we'll be talking how PR and communication help the people to attain that confidence and how the governments played to reach this communication to the people with its various welfare measures. And to overcome this tiring situation, the PR professionals who are working around the clock and to maintain that equilibrium and the strategies over the creative ideas and planning strategies to manage to bring about a client into a limelight. Not only this, they were coping up with the current market scenario to keep their clients active in the market scenario. We all know that keeping a connection with the masses always bears a fruit, and it is essential for any communication to be more effective or for any business for that matter. Having created a longer lasting brand recall and influences of buying and decision making becomes very important. The pandemic has created such a negative environment around the people that they were scared to trust anything new or anything that is unknown. The lockdown also had an impacted product launches and other promotional offers or media events where the PR teams could play an important role. And with the concerns and uncertainties in mind, the various companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the steel industries who were at the helm of affairs came to the rescue of the government in supplying oxygen, which was very much required in the entire nation by the various states. We have seen how the Prime Minister convened a meeting and all the industrialists came together, and they also have foregone their profit, and they started to manufacture the oxygen. And also they had stopped the manufacture of steel, which was their main stay, and they had agreed to supply oxygen, produce oxygen and supply it across various states. Very especially here, I would like to inform you all that how the Indian Railways came to the assistance of the common man, as the Prime Minister ordered the oxygen special express train through the Green Corridor. Being a railway man, I thought I should cite this example. And you know that this train, it was run by all-women loco pilot, which the Prime Minister also appreciated during his Man Ki Baat, which is a radio program, which is done every month to connect to the masses. And then he also spoke about the Indian Railways and this Oxygen Express. You know, I don't know if you all must be aware that it runs through an electric train, and in case the grid fails nationally, it is backed with a diesel engine. So 2 engines run on this train, and in case the grid, the power supply cuts off, the diesel engine takes over without wasting any as a single minute, and the train is given a through run to the place of its destination, so that the oxygen is given and supplied to the required area without any delay or any of the problems created during its run. And this oxygen special train is given a through path without obstructing any signals or anything. It is given top priority over all other trains, and that is how the oxygen special was ordered by the Prime Minister, and it reached various destinations across India, helping the COVID patients to cope up with the supply of oxygen. Similarly, we also need to praise the Indian Air Force, which also joined the bandwagon and also helped with their fleets taking off from various destinations across India to supply oxygen containers to different parts of India. Similarly, the Indian Navy also did not lag behind, and they were also carried shipments of oxygen from various destinations to India, as we have seen in the news, in the media. And that's how the PR element played a vital role in communicating this effectively to the people and giving them a self-confidence that, yes, the government of India and the union territories and the states were well equipped to handle the crisis in the supply of oxygen. The lockdown also, we have seen how various NGOs and the people themselves came forward to help the medical fraternity who are working around the clock, the police personnel who were also deployed from in the various states. And we have seen how the states also had made arrangements to see that the police personnel were also protected. The pharmaceutical companies had done a yeoman service by donating various masks and PPE kits to the police personnel, to the paramedical staff, and to the hospital staff. And the pharmaceutical industry needs to be praised because of their the thing that they had given to the people about giving medicines at a lower cost, or at the cost that the people could afford, and which was made available at various outlets across different states and across different cities in the country. And the people also in various societies, they gathered together to provide food and water to the migrant people who are stranded in different cities. We have seen how the people also came forward in various societies, various localities. The people gathered together, they contributed, they gave groceries, they gave vegetables. And this is how the nation came forward. When in a crisis, we have seen the Indian people became one, irrespective of their caste, creed, and color, to come and support the humanity in such a crisis where it's a matter of life and death. So such instances we have seen. And several states, I would like to quote that, for example, I'm living in Hyderabad, the state of Telangana also did not lag behind. The Honorable Chief Minister had made several arrangements to mitigate and had a number of welfare measures for the paramedical staff, the police personnel. They were also given extra 10% hike in their salaries for doing undaunting task and performing their task around the clock, 24/7, especially the medical practitioners, the paramedical staff, the police personnel, and also the teaching staff. They were also given some 12 kg of rice and also some money to compensate during this lockdown, because schools and colleges were all closed. And so such things, even the migrant workers were also taken care of in the state, that they were given groceries, they were given some money to compensate. And similarly, we have also seen in other states, like for example, the Uttar Pradesh, which is one of the largest states, where we have seen the Chief Minister had made elaborate arrangements to mitigate the hardships of the common man, the migrant workers, the daily wage earners. And this we have seen in the news, how the communication has evolved and made a total different approach for us to know what is happening in each and every state. And this was possible because the role of public relations became more effective, and it became more prominent during this crisis. And every person in this country came to know, though television, newspapers, and the social media also played a very important role in communicating very effectively. Though there were fake newses, there have been certain legislations on these. And now of late, we also see that IT rules have been strengthened to have more positive news that will reach the common man, and he can get the factual information at the right point of time, and so that he'll be able to know what is right and what is wrong. So this lockdown, I should say, has been the only way of getting to creative PR strategies is by taking the radical shift of brands and businesses to the digital platforms. There was a paradigm shift from the traditional medium of newspapers and television for opting for the digital platforms, which is more fast and accurate, of course, with limitations of a few of the fake newses also, and further ensuring that the online reputation management becomes more successful. And we have also seen that in this pandemic, that there have been people who have been suffering a lot, and every care and concern has been taken by the government, both at the state and at the central. And we have seen where the Prime Minister also has assured that most of the vaccines in certain states, we have seen there were certain times there was a drop in the vaccine, the number of people were rushing towards the centers where the vaccines were available, but certain places it was not available. But then the arrangements have been made, and the government made all the efforts to see and strengthen these vaccine centers so that each and every person is vaccinated. with India having a large population of 138 crores, it has been a marked enterprise with the various agencies playing a key role, that the situation in India did not go out of hand, though the second wave had taken its toll, but we could still contain it. And the efforts are on by both the central and the state governments to contain the number of COVID patients, and also see that adequate care is given to them so that lives, precious lives, can be saved. And we have seen how the governments, with the effective communication, could come to the rescue of the common man, and how the common man had the facilities in various hospitals, and several hospitals, like for instance, in several states, there was a media release every day from the Chief Minister's office, where the media was briefed about the several developments and the various measures that the government was taking. Similarly, at the center, the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Family Welfare and Health were promoting and also giving timely information to the public through this news medium and through the OTT platforms, so that the common man is given all the information required, and they could avail of the facilities given by the Government of India and also by the state governments. So it is at this point that we are seeing that when a crisis hits like this, it is very easy for us to get swayed by the trends, that we may not be always be accurate, and lose sight of the overall key reputation. The PR professionals need to act as the voice and reason, and to remind them that the vision and the mission is based on which our reputation has to be built. And one wrong move in a crisis could bring the entire thing crumbling down. So every message we need to sync in with the overall communication, and also see that every state and industry and travel and tourism and various other businesses have the clear-cut communications, so that the people are instilled with confidence, and also they'll be able to rely upon that communication. And that element of communication is the role of the public relation practitioners, who need to work hard 24/7 during such crisis and instill that confidence in the people. And we have also seen how the pandemic has affected the lives of millions of other people across the globe, as we have seen the previous speaker. But in our country, especially when the pandemic is now we have been able to control, thanks to various governments on the state and both at the center, for having a dialogue with the various state governments. We have seen many a times where the Prime Minister had meeting with the chief ministers in having also the lockdown of the respective states, and the chief ministers played a proactive role in mitigating the hardships of the common man. And we see how that during such crisis, how the state governments also came forward and made a marked role in elevating the lives of people, and also in making their hardships more simpler, and came to the rescue of the common man. So with these thoughts, I think I am done with the presentation. I hope that this COVID-19 will sure be able to come out effectively, and the Government of India and the state governments will be able to play an effective role, and especially the PR communicators and the communication elements will go a long way in mitigating and bringing out the truth, and also to help us to understand the various problems across the nation. Thank you so much.
Michael, sir, thank you. Thanks a lot for an excellent analysis that you have made, with regard to how PR quantified its difference in terms of, really projecting things in a proper way when it comes to the national scenario. One interesting aspect of Mr. Frederick Michael's presentation is the fact that, this COVID has not just made life virtual, it has made a difference to how communication picks up eminence when times change. I am sure you would all agree that, virtually everyone, I am, stressing on the fact virtually everyone, because right down, to what you can quantify as, a labor, or probably, one amongst the illiterate lot, also had, its source, ranging to social media, because of, the impact that social media had made. Okay, fake news creates chaos. But at the same time, because a host of measures have been initiated by the central government and several of the states, it has actually enabled people to understand things in a proper perspective. Generally, positives take a bit of time to get injected into the minds, but the fact is, holding a positive mind has been the basis on which people have been able to overcome the second wave of COVID. Positive by mind, not by disease. I would say, if you come to the national scenario, the way Mr. Frederick Michael had presented the entire issue, we can virtually quantify it in terms of one saying that's probably connected to the Kumaon regiment of the Indian Army. It says, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. The government, the center has proved that it has been able to handle the situation. It has been able to really do a wonderful job the way Mr. Frederick Michael has presented. Now, I've got a few questions that have been classified to me, marked to me. One of the question comes from Mr. Sundaram Pillai. He stresses on the fact that language is very crucial to effective communication. I would like to put the question to Father Vinit George. I would like to request him to take the question. Language is very crucial to effective communication. Have you got anything to speak on this basic, phrase that Mr. Sundaram Pillai had got in relation specifically, to the pandemic times? Can you elaborate on it? Because there are a lot of technicalities involved when you discuss the pandemic times and communication. Please, Father Vinit George.
Yes, sir. It's a very good question because during this pandemic time, we are seeing both positive and negative language out there in the media. Earlier, governments could regulate the media because they were mainstream media. But now, since there is social media and it is very difficult to regulate, everybody who has got a smartphone or an iPad has become a journalist. And everybody wants to write something on the post and then circulate their own viewpoints, their own opinions, which may be biased, which may be fake, which may also be negative or positive. So it is very important for the language to be positive, to create a positive atmosphere in our country, especially in a crisis like this. At the same time, we must not overstress positivity to such an extent that we deny saying that all the negative and say that everything is fine. Only when we know what is our weakness, we'll be able to work on it. So outrightly having a defensive position will not help us, but we should be receptive to constructive criticism. And we should not think that everybody is negative, everybody is critical of what is happening. We must be able to accommodate different points of view and try to see the good things in that and imbibe it, improve and move ahead. That's what I think.
Thank you, Vinit. Thank you, for addressing the question. I've got another question for you, Father Vinit. This is coming in from Mr. Philip. He speaks of spectrum of nations covered. He is stressing it to you in the context that you have taken a few examples. I would say about 6 or 7 of the nations, ranging from Brazil to US, and to the positives like how France or Germany has done. Do you think, Vinit, that classifying a few of these states would actually present the global scenario on the entire PR efforts that have gone in internationally? A few countries, can they represent the entire global scenario when it comes to PR? There are a host of countries which are very, very secretive with regard to dissemination of information. Nothing comes much. In that perspective, Philip has got his question. He says spectrum of nations covered. But does it actually quantify in terms of the global scenario the real way? I would like you to address the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Philip sir, for that question. When I was researching for today's webinar, I found that there is very little information when it comes to government's handling of the crisis in countries like China or North Korea, which are very secretive. So they don't divulge statistics, they don't divulge information. So everything is speculative. Whereas there are European countries which are very open and candid, even about their weaknesses. They are open about the true figures, the statistics of how many deaths, how many infections, how many recoveries. They don't shy away from statistics and the real data. So what I did for my presentation was I took countries which represented 5 continents. I left out only Africa because in Africa I could not find any exceptional case of handling the PR either in the positive or negative way, either success story or a mismanagement story. So Africa was left out. Otherwise, I covered all the inhabited continents of the world, and I tried to portray what is positive and what is negative in each of these countries' approach to solving this crisis. So I believe that this presentation has covered a spectrum, as Philip rightly said it, spectrum of the whole world, that what is happening by different governments who are secretive, governments who are open, governments who are successful, governments who have messed it up. Thank you, sir.
One last question coming, I would say not the last, probably look to be the second last, when it comes from the participants.
Sure.
This question is basically, tuned to both the speakers of the day, Father Vinit George and Mr. Frederick Michael. The question is very interesting, and I would like to, this comes from Gurmukh Singh Saab. He says, where lies the responsibility at the top? With the administration or with the society at large? Particularly when the media abroad had spoken very strongly against a particular nation, shall we look upon them to judge, or should we have a barometer of ourselves? I would say this question looks, to be aimed at the global scenario, but I would request Mr. Frederick Michael, to join in with his reply in the context as to how India as a nation has reacted to the global situation around. Before I move on to Father Vinit George, I would like to want Mr. Frederick Michael, giving his perspective of how India as a nation has opined with regard to the international context when it comes to the. For Frederick Michael, please.
Yes, that's a good question from Pawasar. And here I would like to pitch in and say that, yes, India had played a proactive role. Even when we see in the Ministry of External Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, was addressing a press conference. And then upon somebody, one of the media persons had asked that why, when India is not self-sufficient in the production of vaccine, why are we exporting vaccine to other countries? And his reply was, I think I think most of you must be aware that we are depending on the raw materials for vaccines from various countries. And then it is a give and take scenario where when we get the raw materials, we are also indebted to those countries to give the produce, that the vaccines, what we produce, we have to give. So certain amount of vaccines have to be exported to those countries. So we cannot be, though we are one of the largest producers of vaccines in the entire world, India is proud of that. And then we have many pharmaceutical companies who are coming forward. We have seen several manufacturing firms, even in our own Hyderabad city, we have the biotech, which is also producing the vaccine. And then that is what he said in the press conference, that we need to also export to other countries, though India also is now gearing up with so many pharmaceutical companies manufacturing the vaccines, and how effectively this communication had gone down to the common man and instilled that confidence. So PR has to play a real vital role in making this understand to the common man that why do we need to have this kind of situation. And that was elaborately explained to us by the Honorable
Mr. Frederick, I interrupt. Mr. Frederick, I interrupt. I would like both the speakers to be very short. We need to be, having a look at, how the clock ticks.
Right.
For the Vinit, have you got any take, for this question? Because there are another 1 or 2 questions, coming in, please. We are running short of time. I want the answers to be brief.
Yeah.
For the Vinit, have you got anything to, speak on the question that I have already posed to you? That question had come from Mr. Gurmukh Singh.
Yeah, I thank Baba sir for this question. see, for any government, it is very, very testing time to handle a crisis like this, because it is the first time that we are facing this crisis. We are not prepared for it. We don't know how many more people will die, how many more emergency situations like this will come. We are still in the second stage, we say, third stage we are awaiting. So we are not, it's not yet over. The war is not yet over, it's continuing. So government has done many things, but at the same time, there are criticisms. But then the government, instead of always being defensive, it is good that the government also acknowledges there are certain lacunae, and we are trying to, put things in the proper shape. So that kind of an honest communication from the government side will always boost the confidence of the people in the government of the day. Thank you.
For the Vinit, in fact, there was a question coming in from Mr. Ramendra Kumar. It was specifically focused for you. It says,
Okay.
I believe for communication to be effective, it has to be ETC, empathetic, truthful, and credible. Is it that your answer a little bit earlier qualifies for this question also?
Yes, I would surely say that, because because now as I was before this webinar, I was watching the TV, and it is emerging that the death figures of COVID crisis in Maharashtra and Bihar are now much more, because they have now come out with the real data.
Yes.
So
I would now request the jury. I'm sorry to interrupt.
10 minutes left for. Hello.
Sorry.
You have only 10
Sorry.
minutes additional time you have left.
Right, sir. Thank you,
Sorry,
sir. Thank you. Sir, Vinit.
Hello.
Sir, Vinit, you can
Vinit
please carry
George.
on the question.
Sir. Naresh sir, you are muted, Naresh sir.
Vinit, there is a question coming in for Naresh sir.
Yeah, sure.
Naresh sir, please.
मैं बोल ही देता हूँ कि विनीत से क्वेश्चन है। विनीत जी,
बिल्कुल सर।
मेरा एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है। क्वेश्चन ये है कि इस पैंडेमिक टाइम में हम लोगों ने, जितने कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर्स ने बहुत कम्युनिकेशन मैनेजमेंट किया, एक नया पैराडिज्म में शिफ्ट हुए हम डिजिटलाइजेशंस में। एम्प्लॉइज के लिए बहुत काम किया गया, ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ने कंट्रीज के लिए भी बहुत किया। क्या आपको लगता है कि वो कम्युनिकेशंस प्रॉपर फिल्टर हुआ है मास में, या फिर भी अभी कुछ कमी रह गई है? अगर कमी रह गई है तो क्यों, और फिल्टर हुआ है तो क्यों? प्राइवेट एंड पब्लिक सेक्टर्स दोनों का कंपेयर करना है।
हाँ सर, thank you for this question. See, when it comes to the private sector and public sector, the private sector, as we all know, is not much concerned about the people than the profits, whereas the government sector companies are basically established as public service companies. So naturally, they have a mandate to rise up to the occasion and come to the aid of the people when there is a crisis like this. And many companies have contributed to the PM Cares Fund. Okay, and there are also many other initiatives taken by central government companies, the public sector undertakings. But the private sector has not done much, only towards the end when the oxygen was low and the industrial oxygen was need to be deviated for medical use. At that time, the private companies came out to help, and that came out in a big way in the news. Otherwise, until then, only here and there we could find private companies coming to the aid of the people in terms of even CSR. Okay, so whatever they were doing was classified as their CSR responsibility, not because they were doing something extra. Whereas government sector also paid dividends to the central government before time. They paid more this time. So all these were coming in the news because public sector companies have very good PR setup, just like Power Grid, which you had. So there we are able to reach out to the people in a more proactive manner. We have a communication strategy. Many private companies do not have a PR department itself. They only have marketing, and they're happy with that. So that public relations department of PSUs have generally worked very hard to not only do good, but also portray and project the good that they have done. And that is very important, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
थैंक यू अमृता जी, आपने चैट बॉक्स में जो है ये कहा था कि कुछ एक सवाल है आपका, आप सवाल पेश करोगे डायरेक्टली? अमृता जी, आर यू इन? नेक्स्ट, I have got a question, that actually put to. Next, I've got a question, actually
Can
put
I
to
come for a
Mr.
minute?
Frederick Michael. हाँ sir, बिल्कुल.
Yes, I think it is Joshi, not Amrita.
Yes, Amrita Joshi is the name, sir. Amrita Joshi is the name that's coming.
Yes. Okay.
All right, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I'm really sorry, sir. Please.
This is Yogesh Joshi. I come from steel industry, Tata Steel. So I know the ground reality of how we produce oxygen and how we supply it through through the Indian Railways, thanks to the Indian Railways. But I have a different question. We have something called Disaster Management Ministry, which is attached to the Home Ministry. We also have the under Health Ministry National Crisis Management Plan, which is essentially dealing for the COVID patients and the COVID. But as of now, we don't have any crisis communication policy of the government of India, which will enable actually the war room size and how many patients each state. So this will try and keep a sort of check on fake news. Why can't it be a right time now that we all communication professionals come together, join hands, and structure some kind of policy and present it to the government of India? Question to Vinit.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Joshi sir, for that good question. I always fail to understand one thing, sir, that even during this crisis, we don't see the government of India utilizing the Indian Information Service professionals. We don't find them anywhere.
It is no more in existence. Indian Information Service exam was stopped long back. Sorry to interrupt.
But then we don't have anybody like that, of that caliber, professionals being used in India. So
Mr. Joshi, correction.
Yeah.
No, Indian Information Service very much alive. It is still continuing. I'm sorry.
Still, there are a lot of cadres being called for by UPSC. As
but IAS is continuing,
not stopped. Every year, UPSC calls for application for Indian Information Service. This is for a kind of information.
It is continuing. IAS is continuing.
We don't see any.
And there are a lot of IAS, a host of IAS officers doing their job.
Okay.
In different organizations.
So this our conversation here itself shows that we're not clear about what is the role of IAS, whether it still exists or not. So that kind of confusion even exists among communication professionals like us. We ourselves are having this kind of a doubt. So this shows that the IAS is delegated to a secondary role where it should be in the forefront in a crisis like this, disseminating information, dispelling myths, but they have not been utilized properly. And we see the impact of that happening in our country with so many fake news going around. Yeah.
For the Vinit, I would just like to make a small correction.
Yeah.
If you had a look at the question that Joshi sir has put in, he has spoken about how these COVID times should relate to bringing in virtually a white paper on what actually can be done more. It is a fact, tough times make us innovate. This is the time when we actually come in with more of measures, more of plans. And the question is basically related to what more can probably be planned in terms of a PR exercise which can be still more exhaustive, which can be still more capable.
Yeah.
Mr. Shakil, may I add? We are talking and we are discussing specific things, individual thing, and it is said the people fail system work. People fail system work. Shall we not write a paper where the system has failed so that the generation should not repeat? So we should not develop on the individuals and specific, rather systematic. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
You have only 3 minutes left. You can sum up.
Sir, I would request that these 3 important minutes, maybe just left to the jury, to pick up their questions, sir. Jury
they've already had a few questions anyway.
A few more, sir. A few more coming in from the jury, sir. A few more coming in from the jury.
One question,
is the most important aspect.
My question to
George, can I have a
my attention to Mr. George.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Bennett George.
Yes.
You have delineated well the physical aspects of dynamics of pandemic on the world platform.
Yes,
But
sir.
don't you think the communication challenge is to address the change management, and number two, hybrid work culture model in the office and at home, and to build trusted relationship between employer and the employees and stakeholders, and leadership strategy to be implemented in the workplaces, and to create COVID protocol in the workplaces and stability in the offices to add or boost to the socio-economic situation world over. What is lacking and what is to be addressed, that communication challenge is to be
Yes, sir.
addressed globally.
Yes, sir.
That aspect is not well probed in.
Yes, sir. Sir, my presentation was not related to corporate public relations in the global perspective, but how the governments are dealing with public relations during this pandemic crisis. However, to answer your question, sir, see, global companies also have been reacting very appropriately to the crisis. We have seen many multinational companies enabling the people to work from home, not just asking them to work, but then also providing the infrastructure, the training that is required to be productive and effective, and also looking after their mental health also. And I also know many companies now started vaccinating their employees at the campus itself, so that they can come back to work maybe in the future. So these are the ways the corporates are trying to help their employees. Yeah.
All things, all good things.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, Arti Kumar.
Sure, sir.
Jairam sir, with your permission, in case if there is time, please.
No. Arti Kumar can go ahead, please.
Please.
Julie will take another 2 minutes.
Okay,
right, sir. Fine. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question to both the speakers, and expecting a one word or rather one figure answer based on Father Vinit's presentation. On a scale of 0 to 10, based on your presentation, Father Vinit, you give Brazil 0 and Germany 10. How much would you give India? Both the speakers.
So, Shakil, can you just repeat? Not audible.
His question is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much marks you to be giving to India on its success in terms of the PR during pandemic times? To put the question short, on the scale of 1 to 10.
If Brazil is 10 and 0 and Germany is 10, that's the benchmark.
Yeah, Michael sir, I would like Mr. Frederick to first answer.
6 points.
6 is Vinit, is it?
Fine. No, this is Frederick and Mr. Vinit. What's your take?
With regard to the groundwork done by the government, I'll give 10 out of 10 to India. But in terms of communication, I will give only 7.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, coming in, please? Or
Mr. Shakil, I have a question.
Jairam sir, please, sir, please.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, please.
Ravindran, please.
Yeah, I have a question to Father Vinit.
Yes, sir.
Please come in, sir.
You had mentioned that the American citizens were basically doubting Thomases, and they had virtually failed in their public relations communication. Well, according to you, what I would like to know from you is, which country has done the best in terms of communicating crisis in an effective manner? Crisis means the corona crisis, the pandemic, based on your research. Forget Indonesia.
Yeah, the best country is actually New Zealand. We all must have read the success story of New Zealand. That's why I did not include it in my presentation today. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda, has been very successful. Now New Zealand is declared as a COVID-free country. Now, the success is because of many factors, not just communication. First of all, it's an island nation, so it can secure its borders. Secondly, the population density is very low. So there is the infection spreading rate is much low there. But then when it comes to communication, they started very early. Okay, the Prime Minister of New Zealand started very early. She said in her first speech itself, we must start early, start hard, she said. And New Zealand was one of the first countries which started the lockdown, which was communicated very well. And the Prime Minister used to regularly interact with the press. She used to take tough questions. She was not running away from the media. All that instilled more confidence in the people that the Prime Minister is working for us. The lockdown is for our benefit. A little bit of pain, but later we will be happy. And that is what happened finally. Now New Zealand is declared COVID-free. So I think that's the best example, sir.
Thank you, Vinit. Thank you for the answer. Now we come to the fag end of the program. Like how they say all good
Okay,
things.
now the time is up.
Yes,
You
sir.
can wind up with your
Yes,
usual this thing. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much.
Yes, sir. That's what we are doing, sir. Like how they say all good things come to an end. This excellent webinar on the PR during pandemic times, the global and the national scenario has been an eye opener, to various things, that probably have come, from both the eminent speakers. I would say pandemic times are, something, which is once in a century. बहुत कम आता है. ये हमारी नसीब ये भी है कि जो है हमारी जनरेशन जो है पैंडेमिक टाइम्स भी देखी है, वरना कई सारे जनरेशन तो पैंडेमिक टाइम्स को जानते ही नहीं और आगे चल करके पता नहीं जानते या नहीं. There is an excellent saying which says कि जो है उजाले अपनी यादों के अपने साथ रहने दो, न जाने किस गली में जिंदगी की शाम हो जाए. To put it shortly in English, it says, keep the memories, of our present times alive. We do not know, when the sun sets on our lives. I would really thank the speakers, the jury, the participants, and more prominently, Jairam sir for giving PRCI Hyderabad this wonderful time to present this program. Now I would seek our chairperson, Ms. Anandita Sinha, to come over to present the vote of thanks. Anandita ji, please.
Thank you so much, Shakil ji. I think the very involvement and participation which happened, it's a vote of thanks from everyone to everyone. And I can't thank enough the jury members, the PRCI concept as a whole to hold this talent webinar competition to take out the dormant talent in people. And yes, crisis is one of the core competencies of any communication professional. We cannot deny that. I don't think there is any communication professional who says that the crisis communication is not under my wing or I cannot handle. So it's a very interesting topic, very well spoken. Thanks so much to the National Council for giving us this opportunity for the second time. And I hope we could keep up to your expectation. Once again, individually thank all the jury members, National Council members, zonal members, PRCI, WCC, YCC heads, and our Hyderabad chapter team members, especially for all the encouragement from everyone. And yes, Dr. and Mr. Ravindran, you're really turning to be a fantastic, MC. I'm sure you will get a call from the government for the next, Republic Day or the Independence Day, I'm sure. And we could hear your voice on Doordarshan. And last but not the least, thanks tons for the encouragement, for the enthusiasm of the youngest personality of PRCI, Mr. MB Jairam. Thank you so much, and wish you all a very fantastic weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Before we conclude, I would like to announce the next webinar, Talent Hunt webinar. It will be on the 19th at 11 a.m. Nagpur chapter is conducting this webinar. Kindly motivate them. Please join from all the chapters. I request all of them to kindly join and support them. Thank you so much. Let's meet on the 19th of this month at 11 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank
you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Ravi, anything else? I think Malti Gaikwad and others. Are you still there? Malti Gaikwad. Malti Gaikwad or from Chandigarh. Renuka Salvan is there. Lata Madam is there. I saw Lata Madam also of late. Is she there? No.
Zin, how to stop?
Okay, you can